I think your drafted players, especially your players drafted, I guess from rounds 7 to 13, if you're in a 12 team league, for example, that's like the majority of leagues.
All right, so we're gonna go right to our next segment, and it's Ryan's segment. He's gonna break it down for you, kind of give you an idea of what the heck he's doing in it. So, Ryan, it's your turn.
Yes, thank you. So drop and kick. Let's start off. I am notorious for using a lot of moves throughout the year in whatever league I'm in, whichever.
Notorious.
Notorious.
Yes.
If it's a weekly move league, or if it's just you have an allotted amount for the year, I'm just notorious for dropping and picking up players. Now, the key thing when looking into dropping players is how to identify when to drop that player, how long to wait,
Right.
and player trends.
Right.
Now, in regards to identifying, I'll give you an example. So, but again, I'll preface by saying all these categories depends on your team needs and your build, your team build. So everyone's team is always different, and it just depends on what you need to do for your own team and not everybody else's. And what you need to identify, for example, is if you picked up a player like TJ McConnell, who is notorious for steals, and he's really not going to get you anything else. At some point, you're going to need to drop him if there's some stats that you need to build upon. For example, you're really strong in rebounds, and you're going to be winning that category every week against your opponent. Then you probably want to pick up somebody that is good at rebounds and then drop TJ McConnell. Now, how long to wait? Again, it just depends on your team and how patient you are. I'm not the most patient person, but again, if you're new to fantasy, I definitely stress patience in your first year, or even if it's your second year. It's definitely new to you. I would say once you notice a stretch of maybe 3 to 5 games where you see a consistent decline, that's when you need to make a decision as to whether you'll wait another week, maybe a couple of days. It just depends on your patience and your scoring and how you're faring against your opponents. In terms of player trends, this is key, noticing when to identify and how long to wait, and when to actually just kick a player to the curb. For example, you have a player performing at a really high level, sometimes mid-tier, just enough to help your team.
Mm-hmm.
But let's start with weeks 1 to 3.
All right.
This is like a great period to determine your team needs, team strengths, and whatever else you need. However, you want to pay attention to a player or two, for example, say scoring in double fingers for 2 straight games, 3 games, and then they just fall off into single digit scoring for the next 3 or 5. I'll give you an example. We don't have the graphic, but for example, Tyler Hero, he snapped the last couple of weeks, first 3 games of the season. And I think in this 3rd or 4th game, I think he dropped only 13 points, 5 assists, something like that. So it's really mediocre, not as much as what he was averaging in the previous games. Now, if you're new to fantasy, you don't drop Tyler Hero. Again, you don't drop Tyler Hero. You wait and see, because Tyler Hero his minutes are there. So that's a guy you want to keep on your team. And it'll come, like the points will come, and his stats would always be there. However, that's something you want to look into in terms of other players, is the trends that you're noticing, whether they're hot for maybe a week or 2, then there's a really, really big decline. That's when you just gotta make the decision. You gotta let them go.
Gotta cut ties, man.
Yeah, man. And then, for example, so if you look at this graphic here, and this is from Yahoo, you'll see in the last week or so, you'll see that Lu Dort from OKC is one of the most dropped players in Yahoo leagues across the board. Now, why he's being dropped, his stats aren't the greatest right now, and OKC is not doing too well. I think they're 0-3 or 0-4 right now.
Yeah, they're losing.
So that's a guy you want. That's a guy you don't want on your team, because he's not really helping you in many categories, especially if you're in a league that has that counts field goal percentage. He's just going to affect that category negatively. So you want to drop Lu Dort. He's gone. Kick him out.
Kick him to the curb.
Now, another guy you that's on the board here is Grant Williams. Now, Grant Williams has been doing pretty well because Al Horford was out for a bit. However, if Al Horford is playing, Al Horford is going to get a majority of the minutes at that power forward spot. So you'd want Grant Williams is more of a streamer in this case. So in this case, Al Horford is back. He's going to get his minutes. He's actually playing pretty well. You want to get rid of him. And then another example, Goran Dragic. Oh, get rid of him. Dragic right now. Dragic right now. Again, the situation in Toronto is a little bit different. They're going with the youth movement. Goran is not going to get the minutes that I guess he wants and or is there because you have so many other younger players that need those minutes. He's gone. I think he's only averaged about 2 or 3 points. Kick him to the
Oh
curb.
my god!
And he doesn't want to be in Toronto.
Yeah,
exactly. He doesn't want to be in Toronto. So these are the kind of things you want.
He wants to go play with his friend.
Yep.
Yeah, he wants to go play with Luka in Dallas. But yeah, so each week I'm going to take you through a couple of players who you got to kick to the curb. You just got to drop them. Like you got to make the decision and drop them. And then if you need to wait, I'll let you know if you need to wait and drop them. But well, that's pretty much it in terms of that. And then if there's players that you have questions about, come in the comments. Let us know what you think. Ask if you should drop them or not, and we'll give you some thoughts and advice as to how you can do that.
Ryan, quick question. How much leash do you give your drafted players before you drop them?
Now this is my fifth year.
That's actually a sick question.
Yeah, it's a good question. This is my 5th year playing, so my patience has grown a little bit over the last 5 years, but I think your drafted players, especially your players drafted, I guess from rounds 7 to 13, if you're in a 12 team league, for example, that's like the majority of leagues. Between those spots, especially the last like 10, 11, 12, 13 picks, I think you might want to wait maybe like the first 3 weeks for sure. I think that's a good gauge. Your last pick is normally something you can use as a streamer spot, and we can all explain that in another episode. But I think 3 weeks max to start the season is how long you wait to drop those players in those rounds. Anything higher than the 6th round, I don't think you drop. I think that's something that you'd want to trade, and I think you yourself would have that information as to how you could orchestrate that trade.
So he's balls back in your court on it. But yeah, it's true. That was actually a good breakdown and give us an idea of and let me tell you guys, there's 50 moves in our league. Ryan uses 51. He finds a way to get an extra move. It does.
Every year, man.
Every year he uses his moves. This year he promised. Rashawn, didn't he promise this year?
He did, but I don't think that's
how many moves in the first week? Let's not say. Don't say the number, but
oh god, yeah, right. So he's kicked a lot of people to the curb. Let's just say so. He is a master of kicking people to the curb.
No loyalty.
No, if they don't work, he doesn't want to deal with them anymore.
One thing I like about Ryan, that he really believes one of the principles in fantasy, which is about it's a game of numbers and not names.
Right.
And it doesn't matter your name. For example, Carmelo Anthony is a big name, but he can be droppable depending on where he is.
Yeah, that's true.
Definitely could be droppable.
Nobody is safe. Let's just put it that way. Nobody's safe. Wicked. All right. Well, thank you, Ryan, for dropping kick.